Israeli troops move deeper into southern Gaza, urging civilians to leave. Casualties are mounting, but hospital staff say they are overwhelmed.
COP28 controversial president, also CEO of a national oil company, reiterates his commitment to science for climate action.
Israel's defense forces on the move in the war-ravaged Gaza Strip, shooting at what they claim are Hamas militant targets. These troops say they are taking aggressive action in southern Gaza. This after reports of dozens of tanks stationed outside the city of Khan Yunis, just 8 kilometres from the Rafah border crossing with Egypt. Israel is urging civilians to leave. The Palestinian health authorities say nowhere in Gaza is safe. After a day of intense bombing, the wounded have been pouring into the city's main Al-Nasser hospital. Some 16,000 people, mostly women and children, have been killed in Israel's ferocious campaign after Hamas's 7th of October attack, which killed approximately 1,200 Israelis. Humanitarian aid organisations say hospital staff in southern Gaza cannot continue.
I've just visited the European Gaza hospital, and the things I saw there is beyond anything that anyone should be in a position to describe. What shocked me the most were the children with atrocious injuries and at the same time having lost their parents with no one looking after them.
Meanwhile, 2 Israeli hostages, siblings Maya and Itay Regev, have been welcomed back home by cheering crowds. They were freed during the week-long truce between Israel and Hamas that ended on Friday. They were captured while trying to escape the Tribe of Nova music festival.
3 commercial ships were attacked while crossing the Red Sea Sunday. The USS Carney, a U.S. warship, assisted the distressed cargoes. The U.S. Defense Central Command Center says the attacks came from Houthi-controlled areas in Yemen. Houthi rebels say they had targeted 2 Israeli ships in Bab al-Mandab, one with a missile and the other with an explosive-laden drone. But Israel has denied having any links to the 2 commercial ships. There have been no casualties, but both ships suffered minor damage, as well as a 3rd vessel, which Houthi rebels did not claim responsibility for. The U.S. says all 3 have links to 14 nations. Israel accuses Iran of being behind the actions of the Yemeni rebels. The Houthi has declared war on Israel following its war with Hamas. Sunday's attacks could represent a major escalation in the conflict that could expand further in the region.
COP28's controversial president Sultan Al Jaber, also CEO of the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, has reiterated his commitment to science as the guiding principle for climate action.
Science has guided my life. This is a fact. The science says that we must get to net zero emissions by 2050, and we must reduce emissions by 43% by 2030, and that is to reduce 22 gigatons, the one I just referred to, in order for us to be able to keep 1.5 within reach.
But former US Vice President says the appointment disrespects the trust people have in nations solving climate issues.
The oil and gas industry made a mistake in overreaching and naming the CEO of one of the largest and one of the dirtiest, by many measures, oil companies in the world as the president of the COP.
Despite fighting Russia's invasion, even war-ravaged Ukraine understands the importance of renewable energy, announcing a €450 million expansion of a wind farm.
They walk in armors and they see missiles flying above their heads. And this is conditions under which we build the first phase. That's why we are proud of this achievement.
Outside the conference, protesters demand the biggest historical emitters foot the bill to help vulnerable countries cope with the increasingly costly and damaging impacts of climate change.
Once a point of political convergence, the European Green Deal is now a source of opposition within the EU. The European Commission's flagship project is under increasing attack, with its nature restoration law called into question, the use of herbicide glyphosate extended for another 10 years, the pesticide regulation rejected, and the EU's chemical strategy postponed. For the Greens, the atmosphere is disrupting the bloc's objective of carbon neutrality by 2050.
People say, too many crises. Don't bother me with too many crises. We have war, we have inflation. I'm afraid I might lose my job. I don't know who will care for me when I'm old, because our societies are growing older. And all these issues together, garnered with populistic attacks, using social media, spreading fake news, make a toxic mixture of rejection against the Green Deal.
Over the past 4 years, the EU has rapidly adopted multiple laws, including those in favour of renewable energy sources, energy efficiency, a carbon border tax and the eventual end of the combustion engine. 12 out of 13 pieces of legislation have been adopted to meet the 2030 target of reducing CO2 emissions by 55%. But it's not over yet, and the political terrain now seems favourable to a more right-wing approach.
Sometimes we have overdone it, or the majority in the parliament have overdone it, not giving people the choice, but making very prescriptive decisions from the European level, which is never a good idea. When we do everything that the Green wants, we will either not achieve our climate targets, or we will lose a lot of jobs and competitiveness. And both is not good. We should prioritize, we should not overdo it, and we should take people along.
Some industrial sectors and businesses, as well as the farming community, feel that complying with environmental regulations entails an additional burden. Despite these headwinds, the Commission intends to stay the course.
Commissioner. We truly need to do two things. One is continue with our ambition, because it is the reality and climate change is at everyone's doorstep. Having said that, we need to bridge that with making sure there is a perspective for our citizens, there is a perspective for our companies, and do more to make sure, that companies can continue to strive, that people do see a bright future, even if circumstances might change.
Climate protection is more than just an environmental issue. It's also in the EU's interest if it doesn't want to be relegated in the industrial race for green technologies in the face of China and the United States, who both want to win this battle. The forthcoming European negotiations to set environmental targets for 2040 will therefore be an indicator of the bloc's ambition.
The European Union and the White House say they are running out of money for Ukraine. The EU is currently disputing a €50 billion allocation to the war-battered nation, endangering crucial promises to Kyiv made months ago. Even Russian press secretary describes Ukraine's military funding requirements similar to filling bottomless barrels.
Наверное, это скорее вопрос самих европейцев. Понятно, что им становится все тяжелее полить деньги в бездонной бочке украинской. А что касается нас, то наша экономика адаптировалась к условиям специальной военной операции и обеспечивает необходимый режим для продолжения.
At the same time, the Biden administration has sent Congress an urgent warning about the need to approve tens of billions of dollars in military and economic assistance to Ukraine.
In one corner, what is needed to take the deal that is laid before them by the United States Senate.
But the budget director says they are running out of money, leaving a divided Congress.
A reliable partner. That's how Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko has described his country's relationship with China on his second trip to Beijing this year. The latest talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping are expected to focus on economy and international cooperation.
Развитие всестороннего и всепогодного стратегического сотрудничества Беларуси и Китая определено единством наших идеологий и самой логикой мировых событий и процессов, которые происходят.
Chinese state media reports that both leaders discussed the ongoing war in Ukraine. Beijing has not publicly condemned Russia's full-scale offensive despite pressure from Western nations. Belarus relies heavily on Russia for political and financial support and was used as a launchpad for Moscow's assault in 2022.
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva expressed hope on Monday that negotiations about a wide-ranging free trade agreement between Europe and the South American trade group Mercosur can be finalized in the near future.
Reiterei ao chanceler a expectativa de que a União Europeia decida se tem ou não interesse na conclusão de acordo equilibrado. No contexto de fragmentação geopolítica, a aproximação entre nossas regiões é central para a construção de mundo multipolar e o fortalecimento do multilateralismo.
Ich bin überzeugt, dass eine Mehrheit in beiden Gremien, sowohl im Europäischen Rat als auch im Parlament, sich für ein solches Abkommen finden wird, wenn es erfolgreich zu Ende verhandelt ist. Und da bitte ich alle Beteiligten um größtmöglichen Pragmatismus und größtmögliche Kompromissbereitschaft, damit wir das jetzt endlich finalisieren können.
A 2019 EU-Mercosur deal was never implemented over concerns about the protection of South America's rainforest and fears European farmers would be undercut by cheaper imports. Stop the boats may be the UK government's mantra, but since the beginning of the year, 34,000 migrants have crossed the English Channel from France, with an estimated 5,500 needing to be rescued after different incidents at the open sea. The figures are the second highest on record. The Channel is one of the world's busiest shipping lanes, and currents are strong. Human traffickers typically overload the dinghies, leaving them barely afloat and at the mercy of waves as they try to reach the British shores.